One day in the fall of 2001, I got a phone call from a man named Don Barefoot from Greensboro, North Carolina. We had never met, but he told me how he had heard of C12 through a discussion with one of our C12 chairs, Ralph Miller. Don shared what he had been doing up to that point as a large business CEO who had an MBA from MIT. Of course, my immediate thought was Don was way overqualified to lead C12. Who would think that such a highly qualified man might be God's man at first glance? But as we talked, it seemed good that we should get together and talk more in person. Don came to visit me on a Monday, and we spent the whole day together. From my perspective, it was a heart touch. It was easy to be together and share our testimonies of God's leading and grace in our lives. There are times of spirit-to-spirit communion between strangers that are almost impossible to describe, but believers know it when they experience it. There's just something real in the eyes and heart that speaks louder than words. I believe that Don and I shared that kind of communion. I trusted him almost immediately and began to sense that God was up to something. I invited him to attend a C12 meeting as my guest. Don attended a Tampa C12 group meeting, and we spent another day that week talking about C12's vision and hopes. We began to discuss how he might be a part of God's plan for C12. We had no money to pay him and no immediate way to access any, but it seemed right to invite Don and his wife Karen to have dinner with our board and our wives and to meet and get to know one another better. We had a dinner scheduled for that week with our board and the wives, and so we had the time of open sharing at our home. A lesson learned. Personal and multiple, intimate, face-to-face time and prayer with multiple people, including spouses, is critically important in hearing from God in the decision-making process. After much conversation and prayer, it seemed good to the board to invite Don to join us by launching a C12 group in Central North Carolina as a way to test the waters. He was interested and eager to help, and he also wanted to understand firsthand if what he had witnessed in Tampa Bay was real and transferable. And Don agreed. As we walked through the early stages of the process, the thing that meant the most to most of us was that Don was obviously willing to sacrifice financial gain to find his way in God's will. In selecting a leader for a Christ-centered organization, this is huge. Lesson learned. The willingness to sacrifice may be a key look into a successor's heart. Many times that willingness can be seen in other ways, but it is definitely a marker. Don could well have taken a number of seven-figure positions, but chose to step out of that comfort zone to follow God's leading. So many would have stumbled here. The devil has used good money to derail more good men than anything else except bad women. Don launched his first C12 group in the spring of 2002 and eventually ran two robust groups from 2002 to 2005. He started and effectively nurtured the C12 work in North Carolina, which became and remains the leading C12 territory in the country. During these years, we added two more directors and met monthly as a board to more fully develop our business plan and governance model. We raised capital to bring on Don as president and COO and established an administrative home office in Greensboro, North Carolina in January of 2005. We raised the working capital we thought we would need to carry us for 12 to 18 months. But so far, by God's providence, we haven't needed further equity investment. We've grown through the reinvestment of profit without borrowing. The board governance model we adopted is, we believe, rather unique. It works like this. First, each director is a shareholder. Second, each shareholder elects one director regardless of their percentage of ownership. Third, each director has one vote. And four, all board decisions must be unanimous. We believe this approach is very close to what we see as biblical leadership practiced by the early church. No one person possesses the power to make unilateral decisions. As stewards of his business, God called these men together to provide oversight in developing his business in unity. In C12, our board functions in unity to this day, and we have no plans to change. It isn't always easy, but we see great protection and strength in the process of working through issues until we arrive at unity. For practical guidance and governance, we began to study and adopt elements of the Carver policy governance model, a very practical paradigm for board and corporate stewardship. We completed our transition plan in July 2006 when Don became C12's CEO after 18 months as president and COO. It was clear that for the succession and transfer of leadership to be truly effective, I needed to release control and transition to a director and founder's role. Lesson learned. While there may be a short indoctrination process, it's important for the founder to release all operating authority to a successor and not to engage in micromanagement. Many leadership transfers fail because of failure here. Don was truly a blessing and evidence of God's sovereign provision as he led C12 from 2005 to 2016, growing our footprint from 17 chairs and 220 members to 85 chairs and 1,800 members, while improving every piece of our process. Lesson learned. God is a great recruiter. In 2015, the board began to sense a stirring and a change coming. And as the year ended, after much prayer and discussion, it became clear that the change would include Don's being replaced as CEO. A number of factors, including Don and Karen's desire to relocate to Fort Worth to be near their only son and grandchildren, led to the decision to start a search for C12's third CEO. The board also began to discern that different seasons and stages of business development often require different styles and leadership qualities, and C12 was entering a new chapter of God's story which called for a new leader. Our commitment to unity through prayer and open communication was truly tested during this very difficult season. It was not pain-free, but the decision to begin to search for a new CEO was made in 6-0 unity. Again, prayer was the first and foremost step in the process. It was clear from the beginning that the board's preference would be to see a leader promoted from within the business. The opportunity was circulated through C12, with chairs and members initially invited to apply or nominate someone for the CEO position. A process was established with a search committee of the board to screen and evaluate candidates. Hours were invested in prayer and careful process. Some truly amazing candidates were surfaced, but in the end, one stood out. Based on the evidence of his work in leading the Central Texas area from the brink of disaster in 2013 to becoming one of C12's leading areas in just 3 years, and the strong letters of recommendation and affirmation received from peers and members, Mike Sherrill was selected by the selection committee in April of 2016. Truthfully and transparently, Don did not agree with Mike's selection as his successor, which posed a dilemma since he was also an equity holder and a board member. This created a season of pain and distress in our process. Ultimately, after prayer and deliberation, Don elected to resign from the board, resulting in a 5-0 vote in favor of installing Mike as the new CEO and as a director on the board. Of course, we don't know the end of the story at this point, but as those given the responsibility to lead C12, we are in unity that the system worked. God's man has been chosen, first by him and then affirmed through the board, and Romans 8:28 is always true.